Hello friends, welcome to Bluebell Hill Crafts. I added this denim patch to my jeans a couple of days ago, and since there are just a few extra repairs needed, I thought I would jump in and just show you my process because it's really enjoyable and I think it's a great way to personalize your beloved pair of jeans and extend its life. And the sunshine is even coming out for it. I have patched these already in various places. This is the back pocket, and I've just added some stitching with sashko thread. And here I just added a piece of Liberty Tana lawn from the reverse and stitched it in, I think again with sashko thread. But for this repair today, because this is near the knee area and it's very thinned out already, worn out, literally to destruction, I think this will be the way to go. So I've got a scrap of denim and this doesn't have any stretch, and I've got a couple of fabric scraps and some 8-weight Aurifil thread. To make the patch, you can either use this glue stick or little applique pins, whatever you prefer. I will also be using some Fleecefix Bondaweb on the back of the patch to fuse it to the jeans, but it will still need top stitching around the edge to make sure that it will be safe for many, many washes to come. To start with, I've just roughly squared up the first piece to go down. I don't mind a bit of fray because I think that'll look nice after a few washes, but the stitching will secure it at any rate. I think I'm just going to go with a simple layer of these two, and I've slightly just moved them at a little angle, and I'm going to use a little bit of this Sooo glue stick. This does wash out, so it's only temporary, and you can stitch through it. And you could also reposition your piece if need be. I've added a knot and I'm going to start by adding just a few running stitches around the flower just to outline it. And I often get asked what needles I'm using, and it depends really on what I'm stitching. For this I'm using a much larger needle, which I think came from a household needle pack, you know, one of those with assorted sizes, and it was just a really nice size to accommodate the 8 thread or 8-weight thread. Usually for embroidery I'm using crewel needles, and when I'm quilting I would be using quilting sharps. So one thing to remember or to be aware of, you can see that the stitching is a little tough through 3 layers. So you might put a thimble on or one of those silicone sleeves that help you get more grip on the needle, and I wish I had one of those at hand at the moment. Obviously it does help to load less stitches on the needle. So these are really just a few scattered stitches around the images. If you wanted a proper outline, you could use the back split, sorry, I can't pronounce it today, back split stitch, which we covered in episode 2 of the Slow Stitch Sunday series. So if you haven't caught up with that or are new to the series, I shall pop the link in the description below. I hope you're stitching along by now and you have your patch in front of you. If you find denim a little too tough to stitch through, you could of course use a lighter fabric as well, maybe a quilting cotton or a piece of linen, and that would be much easier on the hands. I'm just randomly adding a few stitches up here, just going around the pattern. I'm really not giving it too much thought on this particular patch. I have switched colours and I'm going to add just some plain stitches to go over the edge of the patch. Nothing fancy. And I'm not really too bothered whether they're exactly the same length or distance apart. I don't think that would notice too much later on the jeans. And if I ever need to lift stitches again, maybe to change the thread tension, I use the back of the needle because that doesn't tend to split the thread. So here I've actually gone much deeper than up here, and rather than undoing it, I will turn it into a feature. And I think that's a really good lesson to bear in mind anyway. So whenever you go wrong, quite often you can incorporate it into the design and it's not a fault, if that makes sense. It's just a creative adjustment. and I really quite like the different lengths of the stitches. It just adds something whimsical to it. For stitching on this purple patch, I have gone back to green to tie in the two patches and create a little bit of continuity across the whole piece. Normally I would load several stitches on the needle with a running stitch, but this batik fabric, probably because of the dense weave, I'm not sure, is really tough to stitch through. So I'm just sticking with one. If you wanted some more structured lines, you could just mark them maybe with a chalk pen or a heat erasable friction pen and then stitch accordingly. And you can notice that I'm not going straight to the edge because I'm going to go around with a buttonhole stitch on this piece. For the buttonhole stitch, I tend to stitch from left to right, but if you want to go the other way or you're left-handed, then you could start at the other end. I'm going to come up and then I'm going to, sorry, yeah, this is a prime example for having to lift this stitch because I didn't pull that quite through. And then I'm going under it to then have a straight stitch. And then I pin the thread with my finger, go in from the top, and again I'm going to vary the depth that I'm going with this stitch like I did on the other piece. And I come up inside the thread, so the thread is behind your needle. And that's your first stitch. And then pin it in from the top and up inside the thread. And this is a really great way to finish edges by hand to prevent them from fraying. Some of you know it as a buttonhole stitch, others might know it as a blanket stitch. It's, I think, the same thing, although there might be some variations for the buttonhole stitch if you're actually sewing a buttonhole by hand. I'm just tacking the corner down. And then going into the same hole to come out here. And if you're stitching in the round, you can do really cool spirals. If they are quite organic in shape, they almost look like a spider web. You could also take a second thread and do the same thing again and then stitch down in the middle of each stitch and then, what's a good word, just intersect both rows, and that looks really nice as well. I hope that made sense. So to finish this, I'm going over the thread, so I'm just stitching it in place and then tie off on the back. And to pick up the next thread, you are coming out inside the top there. Hope you can see that. And then you are back to your normal stitches. And you wouldn't really know that you've just changed threads. And so that the changes in depth actually look intentional, I'm putting some bigger variances in now and again. Now that the patch is finished, I'm going to give it a quick press just to set all the stitches in place. So these are the Bondaweb instructions, and you can just take a screenshot of this. It is absolutely wonderful for little applique shapes, and I do use it a lot. I actually want to make the piece of Bondaweb slightly smaller than the patch. So I'm cutting it just inside the line, and sorry, there's loads of crinkling. I can trim it to size in a second. if your fabric piece isn't exactly squared up, like mine isn't, then make sure that this matches the right way and isn't mirrored. The grainy side, and you can feel it, the grainy side are the glue dots, and they go back to the back of the fabric. And I'm even going to take off a little bit more because it does make it a lot easier to hand stitch right next to it rather than through it. And then, as per the instructions, and do make sure the glue is facing the fabric, otherwise you'll be cleaning the plate of your iron. Place your hot iron on here for about 5 to 10 seconds, no steam, and then move it along and do it until you've covered the whole patch. I find it always helps to apply a bit of pressure as well to the iron, and you can see here how it has bonded. And one step I find that is really important not to skip is to let this cool down. It just helps to bond the glue dots with the fabric. You then need to peel the paper off. And you can feel that there is a glue layer left on the fabric. In order to fuse this with your jeans, you need a damp cloth. I've just got a tea towel here and I've wet a corner, so it needs to be big enough for the wet to cover the whole patch. So you place this onto your jeans or whatever else you're mending, put the wet cloth over it, and then take your hot iron without steam and place it down 10 seconds before moving it along to cover the whole area. And it is really important that you're not doing this with the iron, you know, like you might iron clothing, but that you're just pressing down 10 seconds and then moving it to the next area. And here's another tip. If you're mending a hole that is wider and maybe doesn't close all the way, what you really don't want to do is for the patch to fuse to the back of the jeans and then you can't get your leg through it again. So either you could just loosely slip stitch the gap shut, or what I'm going to do, just to make sure is not catching the back, I'm going to put this piece on the inside and then I can cut away in case it does fuse. Now we just have to top stitch our patches in place to make sure that they don't start lifting at the corners during the next few washes. You might have to jiggle about a little bit with how you're finding this comfortable to stitch. So I'm going to keep one hand on the inside and to make sure you're not sewing both layers together. Ask me how I know. And then I'm using my other hand to pass the needle back through. So it's a little bit cumbersome when your thread is still quite long, but I hope you'll figure something out that feels okay. Now you can see on this other patch I have gone right to the edge and I've got a little bit of fraying then that way. But here I'm going to do just a running stitch, and I don't mind if I get a little bit more fraying than on the other patch. I quite like that for a bit of texture. And don't stab yourself either. Which is easily done. You know, I would love to see some of your patches. If you're on Instagram, then please tag me if you post in your stories or on your grid. And I think here on YouTube, I recently started posting, is it called the community tab? It's somewhere on my homepage. You'll be able to see it. It's where the videos, the shorts, and then there's a tab for playlists, and I think then it says community. And I believe that you can upload photos there as well if you fancy it. And I honestly, I would love to see what you make, and it'd be amazing to see all the different interpretations, different fabrics, and maybe other stitches that people have incorporated. So that would be very inspiring to see. So I'm going right up into the corner here. Sorry if I keep moving out of the camera angle, it's a little bit difficult to see. So bit by bit and patch by patch, you can customize your jeans And I'll just show you another one that I've got waiting. So this is actually a piece of denim from another pair of jeans, and this was the bottom hem. And I just love where the colour has worn away. So I've unpicked all the stitching and then given it a really, really, really good press. And I'm going to use these Japanese fabrics, a little bit of double gauze maybe, and I'm going to add it to this section which has already got blue in it on the other leg, so I think that would look really cool. So I think really your jeans are turning into a little bit of a piece of art with every stitch. And I think this really is the best antidote to fast fashion. And you get to enjoy the process. And to those of you who are still here, still watching and hopefully busy stitching, thank you very much for your company. I always really enjoy the thought of not stitching by myself, but being joined by people, and amazingly by people all over the world, so that is quite incredible. And it does feel like a nice community, especially when I hear from you in the comments. Oh, I've just done it. I have caught the seam allowance on the inside. I'm just using the back of the needle just to lift this last stitch. And it really is good to just double check throughout to make sure that you don't discover this when you've gone all the way around. So I'm just keeping the seam allowance out the way on the inside with my other hand. And when you reach this side, you might have to start stitching towards you without turning the piece again, because it's getting a little bit, well, I don't know what the good word is. Restricted, I guess, to how you can rotate this, seeing that it's the shape of a leg. That's another step closer to fully mending my jeans. So I think that one is going to be next. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed this and you'll be mending and creating a little artwork of your own.